Hey everybody. Hey guys, it's Faith. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm excited for this episode. I feel like I'm excited for every episode, but we have a guest. It's not just me talking at you guys, which is always exciting. I have Christiana here with us today. Can you just tell everybody who you are and what you do and kind of give everybody the rundown for people that aren't familiar with your work?
Thanks so much. I'm actually also really super excited to be here. My name is Christiana. I'm a business and wellness coach, live in California, and I'm going to share a little bit today about my journey about writing a book, which kind of tags along. I have a podcast as well called Happy Healthy Hustle, and I'm a college professor. So I'm kind of like sharing a little bit about the good, the bad, and the ugly here with you today. It's going to be really fun.
I love that. Yeah, you have the coach hat and the academia hat. We can put on both
Yep.
days. So tell us a little bit about the book. What's the name of the book? Why did you want to write it?
The book is called How to Master Your Goals because as a college professor, I you kind of like think, well, I got to teach marketing, which is what I do. I got to teach innovation entrepreneurship. And then you always look for things that make the students really enjoy the class when they read it. And I've been a student for a long time. I have a PhD. So I sat for a long time in the chairs that they sit in. I didn't like when a professor told me, well, you have to write those essays and you have to read the 30 to 50 pages. And I was always like, oh my gosh, I like reading, but I'm like really an audiobook girl, right? So I like to go for a walk when I listen to a book. And for some reason, a lot of the textbooks were really like dry and not very applied. So for the longest time, I created material for myself. I basically took magazine or newspaper articles and put it together as the content for my teaching. And then eventually realized, you know what? I should just put all of the what do they really need to learn into a book format and make it super applicable with worksheets, with word searches, with little Cosmos style quizzes so that the students have fun when they learn because you really this is what it's all about. The more fun you have when you learn, the more the stuff is actually going to stick, right? And there came the book, right? This was the birth of my book.
That's amazing. So it's like, but it's about goals. Is it about goal setting or is it about marketing or is it both?
It's kind of both.
Okay.
So if you think about it's called How to Master Your Goals, right? So if you think about yourself, you're actually like a walking marketing machine yourself
Ooh,
because
tell me more. I need to know about that. Tell me about that. I'm like a walking marketing machine because I work with a lot of entrepreneurs and they come to me and they're like, I love doing tarot or I love doing knitting, but like I don't like marketing. So I want to hear, I think this will be a good mindset reframe for some of you guys.
right. So, for instance, in my marketing class, right, I also teach elevator pitches. And when you hear that, the first thing that comes to your mind is like, that show Shark Tank, where people show up and they pitch something to investors. But in reality, you're doing elevator pitches all day long, right? It starts with meeting friends, even if you're a child, meeting a friend at the playground, who are you? What do you do? What do you want to do? And so then, of course, like when I think about like my students always make fun, I call it a hook and they call it a pickup line, right?
Yeah.
An elevator pitch starts with a hook, something that really pulls you in. It's
Mhm.
the same thing when you meet people, whether you want to go out for a date with somebody, you got to pull people in. You have to make yourself look smart and interesting and sassy and fun so that people want to hang out with you. So now if you apply that to marketing, that's kind of the same thing. I mean, you can't be like boring Brenda and pitch your product. Nobody's going to buy it. And so my book, I really on intention didn't name it Marketing Basics or something because
Marketing
at the end of
101.
the day, you might have a dream. And I would love that if you think of that dream, that you actually start pitching on creating the dream and don't just think, oh, eventually I will get to it. But let's start, getting to the goals step by step, which is my concept. I call it petit practices. So little by little, I would like that you master your goals and you actually become more confident in your own body and create that business that you have always been dreaming about.
Yeah, I know you work a lot with like people reaching their goals, and that's a passion of yours. And I love what you said about little by little. Like, what are some of the things that you think really stand in people's way where they're like, I really want to do this thing, but it's like year after year, it just never seems to happen. Like, what kind of advice and tips would you have for someone who's just like, I have this dream, but it's just always like out in the future. It's never like now actually happening.
Yeah, so my very first piece of advice is you have to start talking about it, right? So coming back to what I just said with the elevator pitch, which is one of my most famous lessons or sessions or workshops that I really coach is elevator pitching. The the dream has to be verbalized, and you can start yourself and just writing it down, maybe in a diary, right? What do I dream about? What do I want to do? What has always been on my bucket list? And then when you write it out in your diary, you can start making it a little bit more visible, maybe sticky notes around your calendar, maybe sticky notes around your mirror, things you see every day. And then that's come the big step, start sharing it with, I call it the FAN, right? Let's start sharing it with friends and family. That's the F. Then you can go to the A, which is acquaintances, people that you meet online, people that you meet, that you're not really part of your friend circle yet. But think about this: friends, family, acquaintances. Those people might already have feedback and they might know people because that's the end part, that's your network.
Mhm.
Now, your idea kind of like took on little legs, and people know that you want to do this. And
Yeah.
they will come back to you and they're like, you know what? Last week I met somebody and I think you should meet that person because they could really help you reach your dream. So my FAN, step by step, right? If you think about that, doesn't cost you anything. All what you do is just you verbalize your idea to these three different levels. It's kind of like a target going from the inside out and making more and more people aware that you want to do this. And
Yeah.
then you become more confident with it. But at the same time, your dream is not just like in your diary on your back burner, but it's actually out in the open. And you're like, oh my gosh, I am actually doing this, right?
Yeah, yeah. I love what you said. The dream has to be vocalized. I think that's like a real nugget for you guys. And I read some stat. I wish I could remember what it was, but I read some stat the other day that was like, if you write a goal down, you're like 4 times more likely to achieve it or whatever. And if you tell other people about it, you're like so much more likely. And it got my wheels spinning about how in the mastermind, like how could we get people to verbalize and like write out their goals more. So I have some ideas about that too, because I thought that was so interesting. Like just writing it down and saying it makes you a lot more likely to achieve your goal. I want to hear about this book goal because I feel like everybody wants to write a book. Everybody wants to have a book. I hear it all the time, but you made it happen. Was it like easy for you? Did you just bang it out? You're like, I know what it is. I've been doing this stuff a long time. Was there like struggle with it? What was it kind of like for you putting that together?
That's a brilliant question because just when you talked about the writing down and verbalization, that's kind of like what really drove the book. The
Mhm.
book is actually a curated collection of worksheets. And I very intentionally put the book in an 8.5 by 11 format so that when you pack your laptop, which is usually that 8.5 by 11 size, you can put your workbook right on the top. It's about the same thickness as that laptop, and you can kind of like see it in the background right there.
Yeah.
So the book has worksheets so that you write it out. And then in my membership, as well as in my academic classes, I have people also read it out because I feel that the connection between the pen and the paper and the mind and the mouth, so to speak, will actually lead to that connection of I'm actually doing this, right? So when I saw how my students learn, and of course, I've been teaching for 20 years, it has changed a lot, right? So our teaching nowadays has to be, if you think about it, used to be like, like Thanksgiving dinner every time. Now we're really like in the snack size portion of teaching. The attention span, it has to be fast, it has to be snappy, it has to be somewhat sassy to be really getting through to the students because there's just so much noise, let's use that word, right? So when I wrote my book, I was like, this is not going to be like the Christiana sits down and tells you a storybook. This is going to be like the no fluff, just stuff that works book. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're just going to write a book that is full of worksheets, that's full of action goals, and it has also, of course, electronic trackers. So you can check, 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 check. You get little smiley faces in my electronic trackers that actually lead to that positive reinforcement.
Yeah. I love what you said about like, that you like having students vocalize because that like can just get them started. Because something I've noticed a lot coaching so many business owners over the last, oh gosh, how long? Like 3 or 4 years, whatever it's been. It feels like an eternity. Like I've coached a lot of people, right? So I really notice people get stuck. They're like, I have this goal, but I can't get the action. And they're always like trying to go so far. And I always tell them, keep your head over your feet and just take one step, right? And I always say, like, it's easier to steer something that's already moving. I'm like, you've got to get momentum because I think what happens a lot is people think about what they want to do and think about what they want to do and think about what they want to do, but they're not taking any action. And it actually like gets them stuck, right? And loses that momentum. But just saying it out loud, I could see that first little step, like giving people some momentum to actually get started and how it could lead like into other actions. What kind of tips do you have for people that feel when they feel like they're in that place, they're like, I'm stuck, and like maybe they've told some people their stuff. Here's what I want to ask you. This is what I see all the time. People start like, and they'll start kind of telling people and they'll start kind of working on it, and then something will happen, right? Their dog will get sick, or I don't know, they'll go on a trip, or life, right? And something will come up and they'll stop working on it. What advice do you have for like people to go all the way to the end when they lose that momentum?
Yeah, and it kind of also follows up on what you said earlier with regard to was it easy to write the book? All right. So the way that I look at that is when you get started, that there's this difference between boundaries and limitations, right? That frequently when we get started, you have to create boundaries and you have to be very aware I'm going to do this thing now and I have to like kind of like focus on this, set time aside on my calendar. And I have to say, because I do this, I'm not going to add this onto my plate. I go to create a boundary and I cannot do these other things. So I wrote my book during the summer when I can do virtual coaching and virtual teaching, when I don't necessarily spend, 10 hours in the classroom.
Right.
So here, my boundary was I'm at the computer. I'm going to intentionally write every morning.
Mhm.
And what helped me was that both of my children actually started these crazy early morning jobs. So when we get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I ate breakfast, and then with my pajama and everything, I sat down and I just banged out the pages, and that
Yeah.
helped. I wasn't like, oh, okay, let's make this 1 o'clock today. Because between like getting up at 1 o'clock, there's a lot of time where you're like, blah, blah, blah. So I created boundaries. I was like, okay, I'm getting up. I'm not even going to get dressed or anything. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to work on the book. Right.
Mhm.
And so that leads me to this difference between boundaries and limitations, right? I meet a lot of business owners and they say, I'm stuck. I don't think I can do this. And then they use the two words that I absolutely cannot stand, right? One of them is just. Oh, this is just my draft. Oh, this is just a rough draft. It's like, could you please cut out the word just? Because hey, it's a draft, right? So you got started. So there's not just, it's amazing. You got something on paper. So give yourself a high five. You're rocking this, right? And then
Yeah.
the other word I can't stand is but. I got started, but then I stopped. Well, so be it. That's totally fine. So don't minimize what you do by kind of like saying, this is amazing, but it's actually really not, just don't, think about it as like you got something on paper, you got something started. Now you just need to get going.
That
And
language is so powerful, and I don't think people realize that, but that's like I mean, you guys really need to hear that. And I'm sure if you guys are thinking about it, probably as you go through the rest of the day, you'll catch yourself doing these little, it's like little subtle things that we do. But I think you're right. I think when we downplay what we've done, it's like, of course you're not going to be motivated to do more. Like, right? But when you think like I did my rough draft, right? Versus, oh, this is just my draft, it's like you're not going to be excited to go back and do however many, I mean, revisions they have to do. I'm sure they do like tons and tons of different revisions, right? And it's like you got to stay motivated and want to do that and get your brain on board with wanting to do that. And when we're diminishing everything we're doing all the time, it's like, of course, our brain's not going to want to sit down and concentrate. I have to ask the follow-up that I know everybody's thinking because people ask me this all the time and I coach people on this all the time. And I'd love to hear your take on it. People will say, like, well, I'll put it on my calendar and I'll make a plan to do it, but then I just don't ever follow through and I don't ever actually do it. And I'll do it like once in a while, but then I stop. Like, what is your advice for that? The people that are just like, I can't do the boundary thing. I just never hold myself accountable. How do you start learning that? It is a skill, I think you learn, right? How do you start learning that skill?
Yep, it's definitely a skill. And I coach that in my membership too. Think about that FAN that I talked about earlier, the friends, family, the acquaintances, and your network.
Mhm.
Because you share what you want to do with others, you have to put a little bit stress on yourself and not disappointing all these people that are waiting for whatever you're creating. Because you have a superpower, and by not sharing that book, course, podcast, whatever you're working on, you're stealing your superpower from these people that are waiting on it. Because they will be like, "Did you ever write that book?" And they're like, "Ah, no, no, no." It's like, oh, don't keep them waiting. Well, now they're like super hyped up, right? So you're kind of like you kindled the flame. So you need to create accountability partners, and they have to be like honest, and they have to say, all right, haven't written for a month. Let's sit down, even if it's just 30 minutes, and do some co-working time and bang out a few pages, right? And
Yeah.
then you will actually get motivated again, because it's just also convenient to say, well, I haven't done this for 4 weeks now, and I don't even know what the document is. And whoa, I really don't feel like it. Well, I don't know. I mean, when I did the 5 a.m. wake up calls, I didn't feel like getting up and writing my book either. But I kind of had this mental thing to where right behind me is my door. I didn't want that my daughters come back from their early morning shift and they're like, "So, mom, what did you do?" And I would be like, "Well, I was just kind of like chilling here." I was like, I want to tell them I wrote some pages because I want to inspire my daughters that they are capable of becoming entrepreneurs, that they're capable of reaching their goals. And how can I coach them that when I'm just like a slacker myself, so to speak? I mean, I love being a slacker, but there is a time for everything. And
Yeah.
I think that if you want to create something, you just have to keep going, right? And it's not easy. Winning sucks, because when you win, there's all this other crap that led to that. So that's totally cool. That's the reality you realize.
He's so true though, right? I'm always like I coach business owners, right? So they're always like, I want to make more money, I want to make more money. And I'm always like, that's great, but like as your income scales, all of your other problems scale. Like so
Yeah.
everything you don't like about your business, you're just gonna have more of it as you have more money and more clients and more stuff going on. Oh, I
Yeah.
totally agree with you. I love that example too. And that's such a good example of boundaries where you're like, I'm gonna have this done like before they come in the door. And like I'm just unwilling. Like that's kind of how I get with things when I'm finally ready to do them. I'm like, I'm unwilling to go another month, another quarter. A lot of times I'll do this because I do the 90-day goals. A lot of times I'm like, I'm unwilling to go into the next quarter without this friggin' thing launched, without this. I just did this with our Shopify store. It was like, I am unwilling to like not have this done. Like, I just don't care what we have to do. It's coming up and we're launching it in 2 weeks. And that's just what it is. And that meant I had to lock my ass down in this office all weekend, right? Working and doing it. But now it's done. And so I'm with you with the boundary thing. I think there's something about just deciding about like, I'm not going out the door till this is done, or I'm not eating breakfast, or I'm not going
Yeah.
another week or whatever it is.
Yeah,
Like that always works really well for me too. I love that you said too about you were talking about what were you talking? Oh, your accountability buddies, because I think it's so much easier to be motivated to do this type of stuff when you're around other people doing it. And this is why I know you have a membership. This is why I'm so passionate about having a community, because when I was trying to grow my business, I was just by myself. And when I finally made like entrepreneur friends, it felt so much easier to like get the ball rolling on some of these big projects. Do you see that with your students and stuff too? Like where they work better when there's like people around them doing similar things?
for sure. And in my book, actually, the first chapter talks about how do we actually set goals?
Mm,
Because goal setting is an art in itself,
yeah.
right? You don't like, oh, what do I want to do? Right? It's not like that. There's a goal, and then let's maybe use a little bit of magic and really create a plan, right? Because I mean, and it's really an art. And frequently you're thinking of like these people just reach their goals. Well, anything like that, if you don't have the right system or the right tools, right, it's just not going to happen. And then the second section of my book really talks about the three C's, which is you are connecting with people, you're collaborating with people, and you build community. Right. So in my membership, I really focus that we are, no matter how introverted we are, we need to connect with others. Because if you look at the literature, nobody ever looks back at their life and says, gosh, I just wish I would have published 10 more podcasts, right? Which is amazing, nothing wrong with that. But they might say, I wish I would have connected with 10 more people. Or I wish I would have shared with my daughters how it is to build a business. So it's the people that we really need. And so in order for you to connect, right, and to kind of like build that community, you need to start collaborating.
Yeah,
So I can't emphasize that enough.
I love that you said that. And I have a hard time, I feel like, because people do these online businesses and I think they do think like, I'm just going to do it with my laptop by myself. And I'm like, it's still a business. I'm like, you have to network. I'm like, networking is a huge, huge part of almost any business you're going to do. It's like a lot of it is like who you know and the opportunities you get and timing, right? But a lot of that luck comes from having a great network of people like referring you and talking about your work in front of other people. And that creates opportunity. And I think people often, like with the online businesses, struggle with like networking. So I love that you're like, yes, it's great for goals. I'm like, it's great for businesses. You guys definitely should be collaborating and networking. You have some collaboration opportunities coming up too, right? You're doing a couple bundles and things. You want to tell them a little bit about that and like why you're putting that together and how that idea came to you?
A perfect transition because I meet a lot of people online, and some of them I call my business besties.
Yeah.
And I want to empower their business as well. And there's no better way to showcase their work than kind of collaborating on a bundle and sharing resources that will help other business owners, no matter what stage they are, in elevating it and growing their sales. So I'm putting together a little Black Friday bundle that I call Little Black Friday Business Bundle. And it has a cute little logo of a little black dress on there. Yeah, I'm very much about like the French words, and my branding is like very petite, and tying all that together needs to also come out in your bundles. And then in January, I have a brilliant business bundle, which is called Brilliant Beginnings Business Bundle, because it's January. So maybe we have new goals, and let's maybe get you started with that. So both of them are very business oriented, but then at the same time, always think about there's no wrong time to get started. It doesn't have to be January. It could be that you maybe tap some of these resources early February. But yeah, I would love to see your application come in for any of those. And then, of course, if I can help you with my membership, let's reach out as well and start connecting, collaborating, and community.
Yeah, I love that. That's a good opportunity for you guys. And it's just a good example of like I always say I'm like, I used to like watch everybody get invited to summits and I would see like a lot of my friends and they would be invited to things and I'd be like, why am I never invited? Like so and so's invited. Like why didn't they invite me? Like nobody invites me. And I would tell my team, I'd be like, why wasn't I invited to that? Everybody else got invited to that. And then we started doing events and I started inviting people and now I get invited to like everything, right? But it's because I'm reaching out to people multiple times a year, like asking them, do you want to collab in our thing? Right, and creating the space. And so if you guys are listening, like, and you're a great example of this, putting this bundle together, right? If you guys are listening and you're like, I want to collaborate, but like nobody asked me and I don't get invited to anything, it's like you have to be the one to create that space. And then I feel like people kind of mirror those opportunities back to you. Have you found that with like with your bundle and
Mhm.
collaboration stuff too?
Oh, this is the best advice, really, because if you think about it yourself, it's nearly like going to a potluck, right?
Yeah.
And you hear it in my accent, right? I'm from Germany. And one of the German customs is you're inviting over people to a house and you like are a total slave. Like you make this whole dinner for everybody. And people just show up and they sit down and they get wined and dined. And then they even leave your house with a little doggy bag of leftovers. Well, in the United States, the potluck, that's the winning formula because people come in and they bring food and you make food and you're not just like stressed out over all this. You have all these people mixing and mingling and it's always working together. The potluck, no matter how crazy the theme is, everything always works together because you're trying all these different things, right? So a bundle is kind of like a potluck, right? You give, but you also then can receive. So it's always this two-way street where you really see the biggest success because we are all carrying some joy because we all pitched in a little bit. And I think that's really the formula for success.
Yeah, we gotta make your own digital potluck, you guys. I love that. That's such a good analogy for bundles. That's like my favorite business analogy I've heard in a while. So you got to tell us about the membership. So tell me, what is the membership? They get the book in the membership. They're going through the book in the membership. Tell us all the things. What is the deal with the membership? I need to know.
Sure. So if somebody purchases the book on Amazon, which amazingly, when the book launched
So you
on
can get
September
the book on
9th,
Amazon. I was like, can we get it? Do we
yep,
have to be in the membership? But okay, so
yep,
we'll definitely link the book. I'm
step
gonna go
one.
buy the book after this because
Mhm.
I am a nerd about marketing and I love worksheets and stuff. So I
Yeah.
definitely am gonna go buy that on Amazon. You guys should definitely go check it out. We'll put the link. So we can get it on Amazon, but then you have the membership. Tell us about the membership.
So once you buy the book, you get a month of $9 membership.
Really?
And
If they
mhm,
buy the book
mhm.
on Amazon too?
I know it's a really sexy price because remember, I
Guys.
launched the book on 9/9. I had to do another nine there. I am a marketer, so it's like $9. That's it. $9 membership for the first month to become part of my Happiness Collective, where you're meeting all these other amazing entrepreneurs right there. And so, what we do in my membership in 6 months, we basically walk through the whole book with you. So, speak accountability. Yeah, we're going to have you right there, open the book, use the pages, show up and share the work with us because it's like step one is buying something, step two is actually getting it out and using it. We're
Yeah.
not going to be the treadmill that ends up in the garage.
What a cool opportunity for you guys because you're gonna get like a marketing professor to go through their own book with you. I just think that's such a cool
Yeah.
opportunity, and I'm sure like you'll let them pick your brain and stuff, and like you guys really should take her up on that. I'm like, as a coach, I'm like kind of wanting to tell you to raise your prices, but you guys go take advantage of that.
Yep, and then because I'm a very fun-loving individual, every section in my book starts with this kind of Cosmos style survey, which I call Superpower survey. So you
Ooh.
learn a little bit about yourself because I'm all about what's called a superpower, but sometimes people are like, I don't even know what I'm good at. It's like, well, let's figure this out. So every section in my book, there are two of these superpower surveys where you learn something about yourself. And then, of course, you tap into the resources and learn the content, which is really broken down step by step in these petite practices worksheets. And then what I also do is actually have word searches. I know I'm like really gamifying this whole thing,
I
right? And
love
then
it though.
lastly, you are connecting with us via Zoom. So I call it the NEST approach because you're nurturing yourself, you're having fun with the superpower surveys. You're also using habits, the petit practices. You are essentially learning a lot about marketing. So you're kind of like striving to enhancing your knowledge right there. And then lastly, you're thriving because you're connecting with others and building that community.
That's amazing. Well, it's amazing you built this offer. Always so interested in like the offers people sell, but that just feels like such an aligned offer for you because it literally is like everything you just talked about on the podcast. You're like, that's what we do in the membership. So it's like perfect. So you guys check that out. And then you have a free health guide too, right? A healthy living guide. Tell them about that, and we'll put the link for that for you guys in the notes too.
Yeah, so my free guide is called Effortless Health, the European Way,
Mm.
because we all want to be healthy, but
Mm.
how do we get this done with the limited time that we have, right? So I'm giving you my very best and favorite tips and tricks, how you can weave in some healthy habits in a very quick and satisfying way. And there are really cute surprises in there. So I would love for you to check it out because the Europeans don't even have a word for work-life balance.
Oh my
They're
gosh. They're
basically
like, it's
just
just
about
how we do things.
they are just about life. They don't
Yeah.
even think about tagging the word work in front of it.
Oh, I
So
love
my guide really kind of we look at in the guide at various European tips and tricks and what they do. And it nearly feels like when you're reading the guide, like you are traveling through Europe and you're picking up all these cool little tips and tricks from all over that fantastic continent. If you've never been there, there will be definitely some cute insights. And maybe it's even going to create a new goal for you to travel to some of these places
Oh
and
my
explore them
gosh.
yourself.
So cool. Well, as you were talking, I was like, you were like, oh, they don't even have a word for work-life
Nope.
balance. And I was like, gosh, I feel like I just need to soak up some of that European vibe. So if you guys feel like that, you're like, I want some of that. I want some of that vibe, some of those vibes, some of those European vibes. Definitely go get the guide. That sounds amazing. I thought even just saying that. I'm like really gonna go get all your stuff after that because I think everything you're doing is so cool. And I love every time I talk to you, it's like I've got the framework and the acronyms, and I could definitely tell your like educator side coming out, and I just love it. I think it's brilliant. So, and you have a podcast. Let's plug all your stuff. You have a podcast too, right? So you guys can go listen to more of her stuff over on the podcast. There anything else, anywhere else we should follow you or anything else they should check out?
Oh yeah, check out my Instagram.
Okay.
So my goal on Instagram it's hello.happy.nest
Mm.
that I connect with you and kind of show you a little bit behind the scenes.
Oh, that's always
I have
fun. Well,
another
you know I'm
acronym.
nosy, so I'm like I always want to see like what everybody's up to.
And I have another acronym that people will like here because sometimes they're like, oh yeah, her life is all polished and she's showing up in the classroom probably like all like like looking like totally like professor like in the high heels. But first of all, I don't wear high heels. I wear Ugg boots when I teach, but that's aside from the point. But in my Instagram, I share some behind the scenes. And what's fun about that is that I actually tell people I share things that just totally like bombed, like failed, right? Because I think that failure or FAIL is just your first attempt in learning. There were so
Ooh.
many things when I wrote my book where I like, well, that did really suck. And frequently I was like, I don't even know what the heck am I doing? Am I really doing this? Well, I
Mhm.
really started questioning myself. And then, I share that on Instagram as well. So it's very much like raw, authentic behind the scenes. And I think that there are not enough accounts out there that actually really do this because they always think like, oh yeah, I lead my life and here I am toasting my with my champagne and things like that. And
It's the highlight
I
reel.
nope, not absolutely not, because I think that the true transformation really happens when you also share the good, the bad, and the ugly, because then we can see the place where you came from and where you are now and what happened along the way is just as important as thinking that our goal is also something that it's not even like a fixed thing because goals change, right? So it's more a journey where you're actually really seeing this is what I love, this is where transformation happened, than just at the end where you're like, oh, here I am, I reached my goal, I'm done now. It's not about that at all. And so I see that in my clients all the time. I see that in my students all the time, to where they really, when I ask them what was the best part, is that they sometimes even mention some element that came along the way. They're like, oh yeah, I really love when we talk about sales funnels because I really learned how everything is connected and that really clicked in my brain. And I'm like, yeah, I like sales funnels too.
Yeah. I have to pull out one last mic drop for you guys that like failure is your first attempt at learning. I'm like, that's like the perfect thing I feel like for us to end on is like failure is your first attempt at learning. I think if you guys even just take that thought, I'm always like in the mastermind, I love telling people like borrow each other's thoughts. Like let's come up with some different ways of thinking about things and like borrow. I'm always like, how would someone ahead of me think about things, or how would someone that's great at goal setting think about things? And here's somebody who's great at goal setting, right? You guys can borrow that thought from her. Failure is just the first attempt at learning. I love that so much. Well, thank you so much for being here. You guys go get the book, go check out the membership. I'm sure it's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing everything with us. I really appreciate you. And I just think you're brilliant. I feel like I could talk to you literally for like weeks, I feel like, because I'm like, you're speaking my language. It's like goal setting, it's marketing, it's mindset. I'm like,
Yeah.
amazing.
Thank you so much for having me. And for anybody else that has questions, please reach out. Let's connect. And we might just have that next collaboration in the community going. And I always love to build the little legs that those podcasts have afterwards and really feel like we are creating legacies here.
Yeah. Well, I'm always thinking about how do you maximize the things you're doing? And if you guys are thinking about, you just took the time to listen to this podcast, that's kind of like level one. But if you reach out and make a connection, if you start going through the workbook, if you start like borrowing some of these like amazing thoughts, like that just like amplifies the results you'll get from the podcast. And so one of the things I think about when I'm consuming things, when I'm listening to things like this is like, how do I amplify the results I'm going to get? She just invited you to DM her. I would take her up on that, is what I'm telling you guys. Like,
Awesome.
reach out and collaborate. All right. Well, thank you so much. And I will talk to you soon. Thank you so much for this. This was amazing.